So they bring me in for the last session on most speaking engagements because I'm really high energy. And with this topic alone, I know just enough to be dangerous, but I'm pretty sure I can't fool anyone in this room because based off some of the questions, I'm guessing the bulk of everyone here is in IT in some capacity or another. Are there any, like, raise your hand if you're in the IT world? So pretty much, yeah. Okay, another question. How many of your names start with the letter C? Yeah, I like almost all of our BNI. I'm like, how many Craigs are there in IT? All right. So this one, we've got a couple new members up here on the panel that we have not met yet. So if we can start with Josh Kruger and just give us your background.
Sure.
Introduction.
Yep. Hopefully this is working. I'm Josh Kruger. I'm from Integrity Technology Solutions. That sound okay? All right. So I've been with Integrity for 25 years. I'm the Chief Technology Officer there. So I'm a graduate of the University of Illinois College of Engineering program. I've been doing IT since I started. I've had a long history just at Integrity of a lot of different roles, which has helped to give me some different perspectives on things. Starting as an intern at the company and kind of working my way up over the years to now co-owner of the business as well. So I focus on helping other business leaders to solve their challenges, whether they be IT strategy, cybersecurity, cloud, pretty much soup to nuts IT is what we provide for our small business clients. And glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. And also with this, we'll end up, I'll start off with some questions and then we'll turn it over to you guys to ask questions as well. And next we've got Steve.
Sure that's working. I've never been told that I'm quiet, so if I'm talking over this or whatever, let me know. My name is Steve Liddon. I am a protective security advisor with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a subcomponent of the Department of Homeland Security. As a protective security advisor, my primary, I'll call my particular program the knuckle draggers of the group. We are primarily former police officers, former military special ops types. We do the physical security end typically. I started off this job about 4 years ago in a role where we didn't have our cybersecurity advisor yet, so I had to be on the fast track of learning. I spent 26 plus years with the state police in every pretty much area you could think of, with the exception of forensics. I worked in our legal office, full-time SWAT, and I retired as the chief of staff for the agency. Awesome. And I can explain CISA as soon as there's questions. But
And then I'm Patrick Hoban. I'm the CEO of the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council. And you might be asking, why is an economic development guy moderating this? But in our world, IT is so important right now. Back in the day, you used to have rail in order to have a city. Then you had to have highways. And now if you don't have fiber, you're basically dead in the water. Luckily for us, we have 5 fiber providers that come right into the heart of here. And we know it is the backbone and core of the future of this community. So with that, I'm also a member of a futurist group, and so is Jamie. So our first question, we heard about a lot of the techniques that are going on, right now that people are using to try to get into our systems. Not to go too doom and gloom, counter to the last topic, but like, what are you guys seeing coming into the future as some things that we need to be looking out for and getting prepared for? Anybody want to jump on that one?
I guess I'll jump in quick. So I'm writing a paper on this right now. Oh, I think, is this thing? I'll move it over. I'll talk louder. Maybe I'll talk louder. All right. So I'm writing a paper on this right now. I was telling the story to some table earlier. I had a client reach out on this and started trying to write on it. So AI is a big problem, and we can think about like inbound AI attacks, like, hey, we're using AI to make better phishing emails or craft better malware payloads. But the one that they reached out to me on was the idea of using deepfakes, and without saying too much, this actually happened, to create an audio sample of, let's imagine like the CEO to create a fake earnings call and put that out and then game the stock market as that crashes. And then what actually happened a week or two ago was somebody put out a fake video of like a explosion by the Pentagon, and that also crashed the stock market temporarily. And I imagine somebody gamed that. And as I started to try and write on this, there wasn't even a term for that, right? So I called it inbound and outbound AI attacks, for lack of a better term. But in that outbound scenario, that you're the subject of the attack, but it never touches your network. You can't block it. You can't check and see if there's AI. There's nothing you can do because you're not touching it, right? We talked about like, what could you do? Could you watermark your legitimate communications and maybe put some kind of authentication on your actual earnings calls or on your actual videos? But that would require the watcher or the listener to pay attention or care about that authentication, and people don't, right? Like when it shows up on your Facebook feed, you're going to see the guy say the terrible thing. You're never going to check and see if it was authentic or not, right? So I don't know what the future is for that, but there is an attack vector and it's happening now. And I just see that ramping up and I don't know where it's going. I don't know how we're stopping it, but you ask like, what's the future and what's the scary future? That's the scary future.
Else when it comes to AI?
Add a little bit to that, but I think a lot of that really comes down to trust. And I think we're at the very beginning of that, right? Where in the past, we would trust implicitly the sources of information that we had. You know, we've talked a little bit about it in here of how can we build that community of people and organizations that we trust to provide that trusted information to. You know, AI is just going to multiply that problem, you know, exponentially, and it's going to be very difficult for any of us to combat and society to combat in general. It's a huge problem that's looming and it's accelerating, right? Just like a freight train toward us.
Well, thanks. I mean, I've been paying attention a little bit to that as well. And actually for today's cybersecurity questions, I came up with these using ChatGPT. So I'm using AI to, help me out, as we talk about how AI is going to basically bring us down. I would actually want to know, like, how close are we to actual Skynet? How many years do we have left? Anybody get that one? Okay, next one. We had talked about actually out in the hall, and this is, I understand that this group understands a lot of the acronyms, and you guys literally have more acronyms than we do in economic development somehow. But breaking this down for the small business owner, like, we just talked about AI and some of the other things that are up here today. If there is a way to simplify this, and I really liked the KRIs, like that is something that I had not heard before. Everyone talks about KPIs. I don't know if small businesses do, but if we're going to get a small business owner's attention, what is the best way to do that? Just three things, out of today that we can take back to a small business and say, hey, you need to take this seriously. You don't have to come up with all three. Like, we just get three answers. There's a lot today. And I don't know if we can get a local bar owner to take any of this seriously.
So one challenge is SSL decryption, because there's a lot of concern about privacy. And, I don't know the exact percentage, but I know a very, very large percentage of websites are now secured with SSL. And often, you're not allowed to decrypt, or people don't want you decrypting their traffic to investigate, to look for threats within SSL, within an SSL encrypted packet. And this presents a problem. And I don't know that there's a good solution for it, but it's something that we certainly need to address as threats are coming over via SSL encrypted websites. So without that inspection, you are certainly vulnerable.
I'd say when it comes to having the conversation, especially with SMBs and small business owners, it comes back to that conversation about risk, because entrepreneurship is all risk, right? Like if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're risking everything. You're risking your money, you're risking your time. Oftentimes these guys are like going years without paying themselves. And like you are putting up capital, you're putting up your life. And oftentimes to grow a business, they're taking big risks. So when we go to them and start saying, hey, you should be worried about cyber, you should be worried about these other things, it is just noise among a myriad of other risks that they're taking, right? And
one of the problems that we have, and I talked about this earlier, was we're not even talking to them in that language. Oftentimes we're talking to them about this risk that is among the myriad of risks in a threat language and in a cyber language that they don't even understand. And we're coming to them and we're saying, hey, you have phishing as a big threat. And they're like, yeah, I also have inflation as a big threat. And I also have the inability to get a loan as a big threat, right? Like, so we have to be able to go back and explain how all of this is mission critical, right? And how does that tie in, and be ready to understand where it fits into the broader picture of the business, right? And understand that, especially for SMBs, like sometimes there's going to be some trade-offs and sometimes there's going to be some risk to accept, right? And we have to remember that 80-20 rule, right? How do we protect the things that are important and move the needle the most first? How do we go to Palo Alto and get the firewall and do that thing first and not focus on all the minutia? And if you go out and look at CIS Critical 18, for instance, and you try to take it on in order, 1 and 2 are asset inventory and software asset inventory. Like if you tried to do those things in order, like what a nightmare, you're done. Like, why would you start there? Like the tier number one thing, you'd be done as an SMB. So you got to make sure that you focus on the things that move the needle and focus on what is important for your business. And you do that by understanding what's risky to the business and what the business is willing to accept for risks. And in SMBs, that's usually a lot of risk, right? So we just have to figure out, like, how do we lock up the passport, right? Instead of trying to put laser turrets in every corner, right?
That's 2. Can somebody give me one more?
So, I mean, I need the microphone. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I know we like to make this IT speak with all this. I think my advice is treat cybersecurity like you treat your money in your bank deposit. All right. I mean, it's just that simple. How much extra care do you put into letting one person count your money, deposit your money, and everything in your business? You don't. So if you would treat cybersecurity the same way you treat your cash flow, I think that's as complicated as it gets. How much do you know about how much cash you got coming in and going out? That's how much you should know about cybersecurity, and give it the same effort.
Now you're speaking my language. It's all dollars and cents. That's an easy way to get the business's attention. All right, for this next one, I know across America, Generation X is much smaller than the boomers, and the Great Resignation was real. So a lot of people are, retiring or retiring early. And now we are looking at the next generation coming up and saying, okay, we've got a gap in a lot of jobs, specifically when it comes to data analytics, cybersecurity. So everybody up here, like, what is your recommendation to your younger self? If you're going to get into this role, how would you start that? And we'll start it with Steve, since he looks the most nervous about it.
Let's see if this thing works for me. Probably this. So, is it on? Okay. If I was going to, so obviously, this all needs to start younger. I mean, if you're making the joke, if I'm sitting here in junior high and everyone remembers turning on their TRS-80, playing Leisure Suit Larry, come on now. The people who started off really being involved, learning it on your own, and then having real education towards it, that's what you're really looking at. You're looking at educating people. Okay, everybody's got to do basic math, right? Why isn't everyone doing the basics? It's a lot easier to explain why you need to mitigate a certain risk in a certain way if you understand it implicitly, because you started being educated as a kid. You don't stick your finger in a light socket, right? Right. Once you do that, you're going to learn pretty quick. Everything's the same way. We were joking over here a little bit ago about everyone. If I had to ask for an honest admission, how many people have clicked on a link and had something bad happen, and you probably should have known better? I did. I'm not going to tell the story, but I worked in Intel, and I was doing open source gathering on a group out of Northern Africa. We'll just call it that. And yeah, I clicked, and good thing it was not a network machine. It's that learning. It's not the official learning. It's the unofficial learning and things to do and not to do. But it's, when your employees or when your people do it, or when your owners do it, don't beat them up, let them learn something from it. So
I have an answer for this one. I don't
Go
know.
ahead,
Go
Sarah.
ahead.
Oh, okay. So, so the question was, what would I do over again, right? If I were to start fresh?
What would, you were starting today, what would you recommend to somebody coming up in the field?
So I have a really weird background. Like my path into cybersecurity is complete. I was an animal cruelty investigator that looked at internet crimes against animals, like when YouTube and Facebook and social media was coming up. So that's where I got my start. But what I would recommend to new folks in the industry that are maybe, you know, coming up or want to learn more, go to your help desk guys, go to your IT team. Those, like, the way that threat researchers look at the help desk and IT folks, we're like in awe of them. That's really where you're going to learn the most about computer systems, fixing things on the fly, random stuff that's really going to come in handy as a threat researcher, or if you're going to be in some type of infosec analyst position or network defender, stuff like that. So that's what I would have done a little bit differently early on in my career, is spent more time with help desk and not raising tickets, but like asking them questions, you know, learning from them. So help desk is rad. IT, good folks. Get to know them.
Oh, that's just rad.
Nice.
It's true. We believe it.
If I were starting out right now or advising someone starting out right now, I think a really good foundation for you to start is to learn about networking, learn about how networks work. Networking and security are converging. And it's called SASE. I'm sure you've heard about SASE. But having a thorough understanding of the foundations of networking and the OSI model, and learning how networking communicates from layer 1 to layer 7 will give you a really strong background in understanding how security works. That's
So Walt had a good slide up earlier, that just basically saying that every company is an IT company, right? In reality, we all rely on technology no matter what we do. And I would add to that and say that we're all in security. It's not just the security department's problem. It's all of our responsibility to be a part of that. And to be able to get everybody on that same page, I think we need to start even earlier, right? You know, we have to be able to educate the students coming up. We're at an educational institution now, and I'm on one of the advisory boards here at ISU, and I guess not surprised, but it doesn't change the demographics of the students that are in the programs here for technology. You know, we're practically ignoring 51% of our population by how low the amount of women in this field is. And just look around this room. We're very fortunate to have some, but it's not 51%, right? So I think even starting earlier with high school, being able to encourage the right types of coursework with math and science and STEM. And there are some programs here locally to help with that. But I think that's going to be able to pay dividends for us in the long run, not in the short run, but in the long run, it's going to be important for all of us.
I think you guys all kind of nailed it. And I think it's all those answers together. I think diverse voices is kind of the magic, right? To her point, like talking to help desk, but also talking to your CFO, like I talked about, making sure that we're having diversity of points of view, because this has a tendency to be a very insular industry, and we have a tendency to talk to ourselves a lot, and our ideas have a tendency to get pretty stale because of it. And we say the same tropes to each other over and over and over, and don't advance our practice very nicely because of it. So I think if I could tell the whole industry to start over, I would say we need to diversify earlier.
And for that,
Okay, green light. I liked Sarah's comment about the help desk rocks.
Agreed.
But it does. And I would also like to object to starting over. How about start now? I think we really need to get people to both be interested in and understand what's going on. I mean, they know how to use their phone, but only by pushing buttons on it. Somehow we got to get people to move from pushing buttons to understand what it is they're doing. I don't know the answer, but I think we need to get people who are today users, like all of us, more interested in what's at risk, what's a threat, how do we figure out how to use these tools? Because that's what it is. We're using the tools, the bad guys are using the tools. They just seem to spend a lot more time figuring out how to take advantage of that. I think there's room for educating people on, you can learn this. Even old people can learn this.
I would throw on a yes and. So you'd mentioned like people know how to use their phone, and you were talking about being a futurist, and there's a thing that I was talking about in a futurism group about the idea that people know how to use their phones, but very few people know how their phones work. And people were bemoaning that idea and being like, hey, we're going to lose touch with how our phones work. And my point was a little bit greater in that, like, who cares? Like, who cares? There's an axiom that I talk to my team a lot about where we call it, make it easy to buy, right? So can we make it easy to buy cybersecurity? Can we make it, if you can use your phone, you can participate. You can participate in cybersecurity as long as you can use your phone. You can participate in cybersecurity without having to be a cybersecurity expert. Can we make it easy to buy? And I think that really is part of the magic, right? Because the other thing is the whole industry has been kind of exclusionary and gatekeepy, and I'm as guilty of it. I said I began with, I write test questions for ISC squared, and like that is the most gatekeepy, hardest to pass test in the entire world, meant to keep people out of the industry. And we should be doing the opposite thing, making it as easy as possible for everyone to be a participant in cybersecurity.
I have to get a shout out to Rebecca Henderson, who's in the back, and she's actually running our Be in STEM program. So part of that program is to get the next generation interested in what everyone here does, especially when it comes to diversifying that and getting more females involved. So that's a great program. And I know she needs volunteers and people to help out. So hit her up later on. And I also liked, Sarah mentioned earlier, I think it was the next great Marvel movie was a Network Defenders. So maybe that's a way that we can get some of the STEM people in there. And then also with the help desk is rad. So a combination there, I think we can get a way to attract some more talent into this pipeline. Before I turn it over to you guys for questions, I do just want to see show of hands wise, how many of you in here actually have job openings right now? Yeah, it's ongoing. Okay, good to know. Okay, with that then, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys. If you guys have any questions for the panel, go ahead and just raise your hand and hit the button.
Yeah, I actually have a question that's a little more technical in nature, knowing that we're all IT guys or IT women in this room, and kind of understanding some of the future talk that we're talking about, like email security. We always preach MFA is the default, right? But what we're seeing now more than ever are these ways to skirt MFA. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like token scraping is a thing, right? And it's starting to be more prevalent. What are we doing as a community for token scraping, for example? It's a very basic social engineering function, and it's happening more and more. We're seeing it more as an MSP in the wild. It was something that I hadn't seen before maybe 6 months ago, but now I'm seeing it pop up more because we are default MFA everywhere, right? So what's the panel's view on token scraping and MFA, and what's next there for us as IT professionals to dig into?
Could you define token scraping just for everybody in the room?
Sure, I can help with that actually. So token scraping is when you have MFA on, and let's say you click that little button that says, remember me for 30 days. There's this token that gets created when that button gets clicked, that can be scraped off of the machine and used from somewhere else to log into your email without actually having an MFA token presented. So that's token scraping in general. The way it happens is a social engineering email as Sarah was talking about social engineering and email compromises being the #1 right now. Token scraping happens when you get a phishing email and you bite and you put your credentials into that page and you present the token that gets scraped off of your computer at that point. And then they take that token and 12, 24, 48 hours later, they log into your email after you're in bed and they start firing off, say, a phishing email to your accountant to have them pay an invoice or change an ACH. So that's something that I've seen personally in the wild, and I'm sure others have seen it in the wild now. I know other MSPs here in town have seen it because we kind of hear the ongoings of other companies around town. And that's in general one of those things that's just popping out for me right now, that as much as we preach the basics of multi-factor authentication and having that as a default, this is one of those things that's popping up. And what are we all doing to defend against that type of next attack?
Sarah, you're being put on the spot.
Yes, I'm like squirming in my seat, ready to talk about this. Okay, so we see, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the incredibly smart individual who just explained MFA, token theft, and scraping to the entire room, but we see, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Brian Hatcher, I own Brick Technology Group here in town.
Oh, okay.
We're a managed service provider as well.
Okay. Well, yes, that explains why you're so fluent in all of this. So we see, so I talked a lot about phishing as a service, those like affiliate models that are threat actors can go buy whatever they want to use tools to whatever. So we see that actually with these MFA token theft tools, like Evil Proxy is the name of one right now that's really, really, really popular. So Brian is absolutely correct. This MFA token theft concept technique is very popular. Evil Proxy has a couple success like older versions. So there's Evil Gen X, which is one that's separate, and then Evil Proxy 3 just came out. So these threat actors are constantly developing these tools. And the message I like to convey to users is that not to be discouraged, not to stop using MFA. It's industry best practice, right? But we can never trust anything 100%. So you should have some type of network detections or isolated browser model to open these websites that could possibly be infected with these types of phish kits or phishing as a service, reverse proxy. I'm throwing around a lot of really technical terms. Brian probably gets it, but I'm going really fast. So I don't want to take up too much time, but these are the types of things that you can detect if you have something like emerging threats would help here, or some type of network detection. So that's one thing to do. But yeah, we do see this quite a bit in threat data. We block it, but for those who are not Proofpoint customers, it is definitely a concern.
I would add to that too. I think it's great to be able to raise awareness of that issue because it is emerging and we're seeing it a lot too. In fact, we have one of our SOC team analysts create a video for our whole team to show here's what this proxy can do and here's what it looks like, to try to raise awareness for our team too. I think there's a couple pieces to that too. I mean, Kerberos tokens have been around forever as well. I mean, it's not a new problem, but it wasn't really solved with Kerberos either. So I think they're going to need some new and unique ways to resolve that. You've probably seen like with Microsoft 365, they're adjusting how they do MFA, where instead of just getting a push or entering a token, you're required to actually enter a number matching code. So if you don't have that enabled, I would definitely take a look at that because that can help a lot. And Duo has some of the same things and some of the other vendors, but I think there's going to be a rapid pace of innovation because that problem is so existential that it's a huge threat for all of us. And I usually tell clients, if you're not on MFA, you're behind, right? I mean, that's a bare minimum. But if you're on MFA, it's time to raise the bar. You know, we're needing to move on to the next level of protection.
So are you guys seeing more use of these, of like YubiKey, for example? Is that what we're starting to push out more? Are we looking at YubiKey or some sort of physical token now that we need to be really pushing? And then on the other side of that, are we, the next step there for the way we block the presentation of that token scrape? Are we looking at DNS filtering as a whole for now, or the firewalls obviously aren't doing a great job of blocking it. Endpoint detection's not doing a great job of blocking it. So now we have to think a little heavier about how we fix this problem of just the default that we're pushing out to everyone to be safe with multi-factor authentication. And I've kind of lost a lot of sleep over this one because it's one of those things that could hit and cost a lot of money on the other side. And it really ties into this whole cyber insurance. How safe are you, right? And what's our risk as a small business? And what's the risk of the small business sitting at the table with us? So, I'm kind of curious of what your opinions are on that stuff as well.
Additional factors are oftentimes heartburn for lots of different types of organizations because they just don't fit into people's workflows. And whether those are hard tokens or soft tokens or phones or whatever it is, like everybody's different business has different problems with different factors, right? I run into businesses where just phones are a non-starter. You can't have phones in our production area, or there's no way anybody's gonna be able to carry this token or whatever it is. So figuring out the factor part, like to your question of like, are people going to move to YubiKeys? Like, there's not going to be a ubiquitous solution for everybody. To your question about like, hey, how do we deal with this? MFA bypass is going to continue to be a problem. So to your point, we have to up the ante on how are we doing our MFA and do better MFA. Start moving away from memorized credential and start moving toward passwordless and like newer technologies in general. Also, there are some detection things that you can do. So not just doing standard MFA, but moving toward adaptive authentication. So like, no, you don't have to MFA, but when that person tried to present that token and it was from a different physical geography and the timestamp didn't match and now you're the stamp of your machine changed. Like there are some things we could see that like it would adapt and say, hey, you need to represent an actual authentication because the circumstances don't match. If your particular MFA software doesn't allow that, if you don't have SimSock, whatever, whoever is your MSP who's doing your SimSock, whatever, should be able to correlate that stuff in log data too, right? Like, hey, this login attempt, you were logged in Bloomington, and now you're trying to log in from Russia. That's probably not legit, right? And be able to correlate that and find those and do risk
could you
scoring.
explain SimSock?
Oh, SIM is security incident and event management. It is a piece of tool that like collects all your logs and does correlation. SOC is security operations center. That would be the place where your SIM lives and like where your analysts and stuff are. Sorry about acronyms. However, the more important part goes back to the broader story, which is the who cares, the what about it, right? So like what we're describing is a threat, right? Like, okay, people are going to steal your credentials and they're going to get in. And the question is, what are they going to do with those credentials once they get in? And the big problem is we have all these networks that are just wide open. And once you get in with the credentials, you can do whatever you want in the whole world. You can go anywhere you want. You can escalate privileges. You can exfiltrate stuff. You can be in there forever and no one will ever see you. If we can close those things, it wouldn't matter so much if people could get in. And the problem is like we're a balloon and the world is needles and we keep trying to build a better box to put our balloon in instead of trying to not be a balloon, right? So there's something to be said about like, instead of constantly trying to figure out how to keep the folks from stealing the credential, how about we keep them from doing stuff with the credential once they get it? And if we could do some more microsegmentation, if we could do some more detection once they were on the inside, if we could do some risk scoring and some insider threat monitoring and stuff, it wouldn't matter so much.
And what we're talking about here a little bit is the principles of ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Architecture. Zero Trust Network Architecture is a framework. It's not a product. If somebody comes to you and says, "Oh yeah, we have zero trust. We have zero trust network architecture, or we have a zero trust framework." If we have zero trust in our product, that's not the case. It's a framework that you build. Now, that's after you get authenticated. Once you're in, a zero trust network architecture is zero implicit trust. The user is verified, the device is verified, and the application is verified for every single connection, every single conversation. And that's kind of like the new thing. Now, once, you know, the authentication initially is very important. Obviously, it's critical. But I think we're talking some of the principles of zero trust here.
That's exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna just build on, just going back to your question. I think a huge part of the issue is the tokens in particular, is just how much so many products in the industry rely on tokens, where you have this token, you're in, and it doesn't check anything else. And so much of the trust for tokens is just baked into so many of the products we all use. Everything from directories, like Active Directory, over to pretty much every web application that relies on cookies and everything in between. And it could be a change in the way that we do authentication in the first place. Maybe like up there, you said hardware tokens, it could be something like that. It could be also what you were saying, where you're taking in additional factors like a user certificate or a client certificate of some sort for a computer, plus a token, plus something else that creates that persistent session. But when you have most products in the industry that just take a token and say, well, you're logged in as that user because I gave that token to that user, and that's all that the product does, which is, it seems like how most products work, it's really going to be a persistent problem, and you almost need to have just a different mentality for how these actual applications are developed on the supplier side. The other piece on that I can mention is that it's also important that this is going to happen. You do need to have procedures and an incident response plan for when this happens. And it's interesting you bring this up, because I actually saw the first case of that I've seen forever, like a month ago. And how we handled it was, thankfully, it was in one of our products that allows for session revocation. So we were able to go in and revoke sessions, and we had a response plan built for that in advance. We were able to follow that and remediate it. So it's not just preventing it, but it's also having that plan in place to remediate it. But in my opinion, it goes back to what you're saying with passwords authentication and just different ways to do authentication that are just holistically better than the way we're doing it now. And I don't know if there is a solution until we get that.
Well, and the reason they're built that way, though, is because people hate having to authenticate all the time, and it's a pain and it's a hassle. And so we have erred on the side of openness and access, because that's what people want for workflows, right? So anything that we would do otherwise interrupts work days. So there's a trade-off, right? So back to that risk conversation, there's some risk to be had, and businesses are willing to accept some risk. And sometimes we just have to ride along with them on that risk acceptance.
Privilege access. I go from one position to another, just because of the fact it takes so long, and it would take so much manwork, that if I used to be an admin, all of a sudden I am a network administrator from a help desk. It's on. And take those permissions with you, that means you have too much permission. And once your ID is cracked, then they can exfiltrate everywhere. Yep. There needs to also be looked, this also needs to be looked at as each person has least privileged amount of access.
Oh, for sure. Can you explain what you mean by least privilege access?
You only have access to what you specifically, if you're in payroll and you move to accounting, not accounting, into advertising, all your permissions for payroll are gone. So you can no longer go into payroll. I've seen a lot of companies I work for that somebody's been there for 20 years. So they have accounting, they have advertising, they have HR, they have, and then people on their team go to them because they can get access. And if you get that account hacked, then that account just opens keys to the kingdom.
Right. And in a lot of places, it doesn't take 20 years. A lot of places we onboarded Steve, and they're like, what is Steve's job? He does the same job as Bob. Cool. Just copy Bob. Well, Bob's been there 20 years. And so now you get all the things that Bob has. And so now Steve has all the things of 20 years of worth of access. And there's an idea, and a lot of you may have heard the term technical debt, right? Where you talk about like you have old antiquated systems. There's a term I use a lot I call strategic debt. And it's this idea that there was things we knew we were supposed to do 10 years ago and never bothered to do. Things like identity and access management and data security. And we now owe them. And it's now time to do zero trust and stuff. And there's this stuff that we sucked at for a decade and didn't bother to do. And now we owe it and we have this strategic debt. And so we didn't do data security and we were terrible at it. And we didn't do classification and we didn't go out and do our data discovery and we don't know where our data is and we didn't do access control. And so now it's time to do zero trust and we can't, because of all the things that you're talking about. Our roles stink and our Active Directory groups are a mess and our permissions are a mess and our people are everywhere and we can't control access to stuff. We don't know what our data is. We don't know where it lives. We don't know what's critical. We don't know what's sensitive. Now there's so much of it and it's in the cloud and it's on-prem and it's all the places. If we wanted to go discover it, we couldn't. That would never, it'd be a never ending project. So how do we do any of this stuff? And what you're describing is access governance. And it's a whole huge nightmare. And I don't know how to solve for that in like an SMB space, because we're still trying to figure out how to solve for that in a fortune space. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but you guys have a runway before that gets solved for you, because it's expensive and difficult in the enterprises right now. So
got to look at it from the client's point of view of the user. You're now demanding that they use 2MFA. You're now demanding that they use YubiKeys.
Right.
What does that do to their workflow, which causes them to be interrupted, which causes them to be less productive, which impacts your bottom line?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a huge hurdle. It's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it's almost like you need to take away the rights and wait for that person to complain.
Yeah.
That's the best way to clean out the closet.
It's the best way to generate a resume too.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I understand that, but it's, there are ways. It's not an easy solution.
Sounds like a job for the network.
In your field, have you discovered an easy way to determine like what sites a specific user could be registered for with their email address? Like if I have a user leave my company, they may have access to like 15 different websites and I only manage 3 of them because they're all set up by someone else or the company itself. You guys have any insight on that?
I'm pretty sure Palo Alto has a solution for that.
The user,
He
like,
wants
to
to
determine what
manage
sites they're
shadow IT.
shadow IT, like connecting up to unsanctioned apps and unsanctioned SaaS.
Sure.
Yeah, there are ways to protect against that, and that's also part of the zero trust network architecture, a framework. You build that in. Absolutely. Now, like you said, of course, a large company, they're not going to start turning off permissions and waiting for people to complain. But if you're in a small business and you have, a small amount of users, you can start experimenting with that. And, there's going to be some pain. It's going to take a little bit of time. But if you want to do it right, start in the beginning. You got to start. It's better to start doing something than just kind of hoping that we can get this fixed sometime.
I'm going to ask zoom back and ask a bigger question. So what implications does a lot of what we're talking about have for national security, and what can the local community and small business sector, how can they be a part of that conversation, those solutions?
I'm going to defer to Seesaw on this one.
As I'm going through, what do I say and what do I not say? So let's use national security as a different example, slightly different example, with Colonial Pipeline. Since we all understand it, we all know what happened. So we're not talking hijacking and taking over somebody's nuclear silos, right? We're talking about making it ineffective for the general public to do their business. Therefore, the government can't do their business, and therefore it crashes the economy and yada yada down the road. So one of the reasons that CISA was developed and the Joint Cyber Defense Initiative, that JCDC that's been out, it's been, I'm sure some of the people here have been, have either seen it or been a partner in some of the talks. This is about creating an architecture for starting with the federal government, because I'll be 100% honest with you. I think that government officials are 10 times worse than any of the people that run a small business when it comes to security, because if they can't just do what they want to do now, something's got to be broken. And trying to talk people down. That's why it's great. My current director is completely phenomenal about talking in a realistic way to people how to protect your system. So I won't get into the DoD end because we don't really handle any DoD type stuff. They are their own entity and are extremely good about everything they do. But you're talking about creating policies and practices. You're talking about finding ways so everybody knows that it was not a part of what we do is it was not an industrial control system problem with the Colonial Pipeline. Everybody knows that, right? They did not shut off the oil. The company shut off the oil. What really happened was they couldn't make money off the oil because they were affecting their businesses. And if a business system can't be affected, they're going to stop because they're not going to do their job for free. Nobody's going to give away oil for free, right? That's just not going to happen. So try to talk around this in order to not pin myself to something that I probably shouldn't say. So the beginning of that is the creation of the policy of how are we going to do things from the federal end, and then make recommendations. So, for example, we talked about, and Sarah talked about doing vulnerability scanning and some other things like that. You know, there's a lot of places that can't afford to do that themselves. And so how do you get that done? Well, I can tell you that if you run to our website, not that I'm advertising here, but there's a lot of free services that we offer for medium and smaller sized businesses that can't afford to do the bigger stuff. And we do not work that ourselves. That's not just a bunch of us in Washington trying to figure out how to do things. We're working with the major partners all around the country that do this for a living to find out what's going to be best for all of us. So somebody said it earlier. Security isn't about me. Security is about us. And several people have said it. So that's what it is. It's when you see something, say something. I can guarantee you right now, my department's really mad at me today because I got annoyed with an email they sent out about a new software. So I report them as spam. Hypothetically might do that when I get training assigned that I don't really want to do periodically, just to see if they're paying attention to it. But it's that creating an idea from the framework and then letting it spill out to everybody, I think is kind of, I know I probably talked around that, but.
I was promised more hope today, so I'd like to see if anybody up there has some words of hope for how we manage this and how we work together.
The hope is that all the smart people are working, you know, not all of the smart people are bad guys, frankly, you know, we wouldn't be able to, my job is to get all the bad guys. It's dedication and intelligence all we can do that. You're doing that. That's the hope.
Yeah, I believe the hope is
like this, by the way, so stay involved is, you know, in my experience, with intel streams, the best thing in the world is sharing. Businesses don't like to do that, right? They don't want to get out and say, you know, they don't want to figuratively drop their name in front of everything. But you need to do it. You need to tell people what happened. You know, it's not about people testifying. So tell people what's going on. So share information.
Yeah, you're not alone. You know, everyone's having these same issues. Start somewhere. The key is start.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity here. But
So Sarah's laptop froze up, so I'm relaying a message from her. So basically on the hope question, let them know that hope is we're in this together. threat actors target humans first, get to the technology, keep up the education and awareness.
Summed up this conference. That was
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, I like to think that the good guys are actually smarter. And speaking of smart good guys, good transition to bring Charlie back up to close us out.
I'm a good guy, right?
Smart guy. Yeah.
I took a few notes, and I think I can read my notes. So the question directed at that Steve answered was actually the genesis of this cybersecurity piece. My CISO over there knows my rant about this piece, right? I feel like all of us here who are in IT in some form could be part of a National Guard, a reserve unit, right? And as soon as there's a threat that appears in either one of the areas that we're in or nationally, we could be pressed into service. And the reason it's very frustrating, now you see, I've got to be careful. When I know a little bit of Steve's background, and I know he sized me up and he can neutralize me in 5 different ways. so I've got to be careful about that, right? But one of the things that frustrates me no end is that the federal government or the authorities do have the equipment and probably are able to tell me all the vulnerabilities in the Illinois in the ISU system, right? They're probably able to see that there's a foreign threat targeting a specific server. But we will not hear about it unless we have someone like Steve who knows me and goes, hey, I thought I saw something going on. Do you want to take a look at that server, right? But it's inconsistent. So that was the genesis of this thing where I said, well, we need to have an authority on this in this area that's recognized as an authority. And so when Steve and others, and it's not just Steve, we've had Secret Service and the FBI reach out at different points and say, hey, watch for that server. But I can never depend on that person to call me again, right? And that's very frustrating because I know that they know what's going on, but out of the goodness of their heart, this one time they called me, right? So I told Dan Tobey, I said, we need something here that's recognized, right, in Bloomington Normal as the one place that everyone can call. And then we have some sort of agreement where Steve or the CISO or someone will consistently call us and say, hey, Charlie, could you reach out to Leon and let him know that one of his servers may be compromised, right? And that kind of trust would go a long way. So that really was the genesis of it. I wasn't going to go there, but since since it came up, I think that is where we want to aim at. In 1 year and 2 years, we become we. I don't know what that we is yet, right? Okay, so that is, I'm supposed to wrap up and talk about the future, right? What we get out of this. So that's one of those things that I would love, with all the smart people in this room, figure out how to get this one authority in Bloomington Normal, right? A security awareness authority that's trusted. You can't, it's like the Ren Isaac thing. You can't get on that list unless you're vetted by someone else. And once you're vetted, you're part of it. And when the authorities see something going wrong with anyone's systems that they understand is in Bloomington Normal, they reach out to us and we relay that information. Tony from CISA has already started to do that. He's sent out a couple of notices to us and said, hey, watch out for this. There's an issue. And I've reached out to Leon and others and said, hey, keep an eye open for this. But we want to make that formal. We want it to be something that people here that are interested can be part of. One of the big misses in 1 year of planning for this thing, one of the big misses was our partners here on Canada, we should be partnering with the MSPs, right? So the last 2 weeks, it suddenly dawned on me, hey, wait a second. There's some very smart people we should have been talking to right from the get-go, and they serve businesses. So I reached out to Brian, he called me, we talked on the phone, I reached out to Jason, Josh and them, and I basically apologized. I said, in the 1 year, I did not think about reaching out to you all. So one of the next steps, and Craig and Dan Tobler will help me out with this, is to have another meeting with the MSPs, right?
and the BNIA, and to talk about, what messaging do we give out of this thing. I want it to be coordinated with the MSP so that we don't confuse your clients, right? If we send out a branded thing of 7 steps, I want it to be 7 steps that you agree with, so that if your clients see that, they don't get confused. So I'd like in the next few weeks to get together with you all. It won't be a whole day thing. It'll be a couple of hours, and we'll get that going. Yeah, it will not be a whole day thing. Craig. Okay, so that's going to be a next step. The one thing that we had said this conference would be about was cybersecurity insurance. We did not talk about that at all. So again, I think with the help of the MSPs, right, we will talk about cybersecurity insurance, and we have contacts with the insurance companies, people who are willing to talk to us. We understand, one of the things that I understand, it's easy for my organization, it's easy for Leon and the big organizations not negotiate, but to deal with cybersecurity insurance for. They have increasingly come to us and said, hey, we're not going to insure you unless you do A, B, C, D, right? And those A, B, C, D things are really good. It's just not it wasn't part of our immediate program. And Dan Torby and them have had to quickly switch up their program to meet those needs. Well, what does that look like for a small, medium business? What does it look like for the MSPs who serve those things? Brian had talked about how his clients are getting letters directly from insurance companies asking them about encryption and stuff that they can't answer. How do we get through to the insurance companies and say, hey, look, this segment, the small, medium business segment, is ready and willing to get on board, but please don't have all these complicated language. It needs to be priced right. There is a market here. Let's talk about that. So we will have that as a follow-up as well, to grab people in the insurance area. And we have some high-level people who say they want to serve the small, medium businesses. We'll see how they come through. Because we believe, I believe after going through the cybersecurity pieces here, that it's absolutely necessary. ISU absolutely depends on cybersecurity insurance. If we got hit and we had to pay a ransom, we can't afford to pay that ransom without cybersecurity insurance. Cybersecurity insurance covers things like call centers, right? They bring in forensic people. These are assets that we absolutely do need. However, there has to be some negotiating between the companies. So it's going to be a price of business, no question about it, or a price of running business in the future. But we need to have that discussion with the company. So that's another follow-up. So bottom line, in about a year, I say that because my team's tired right now. So, yeah, so in about a year, we will have this authority, right, in Bloomington Normal, that's going to be made up of a bunch of people here that will be a trusted security awareness group, right? We will have everyone from the school districts part of it. So as soon as there's a threat that's made aware to the folks there, they'll know to reach out to us and we'll disseminate that. So that definitely is coming. And then in a couple of weeks, like I said, we'll work with the MSPs to talk about follow-up stuff. One thing that came to my notice is that the BNIA website probably needs a few more changes. So where's the EDC here? So we will be working together to clean up the website and put some stuff out there. We do have everyone's email addresses. So as soon as things start coming up, we'll shoot out emails. Do not expect anything before the end of summer because like I said, my team does not want to do any more stuff. Right? I wanted to thank everyone. Again, I'll just go through really quick. I love Tara Wheeler's piece about security as a community good. So Sarah, thank you very much for that quote. I actually went out and looked up Tara Wheeler. Do not look up Tara Wheeler. She is everything. She does everything. She's super good. I mean, I felt tiny at the end of it, right? But yeah, security is a common good. Thank you, Sarah, for that. And thank you for joining us from wherever Sarah joined us. And then there's Walt that I know had to fly in and got stuck at our airport here because there's no Uber at 10 in the morning. There's no Uber. 10 and 8. Oh, okay, there you go. There's no Uber. So thank you, Sarah, Walt, Josh from Integrity for jumping in last second. Steve for not killing me. Daniel, and above all, Julie. Where's Julie? Is Julie left? Oh, okay. Julie for going all out and getting all of you all together here. This I can say without a doubt that it's beaten my expectations. I don't know about you all, but it went way beyond what I thought it would do, except for the cybersecurity part of it, insurance part of it. I mean, that's the only piece that we were supposed to talk about. That was the headliner. We did not talk about that piece. Right? Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Craig. And for everyone else that had to stay up late nights to, or late, Patrick, of course. Thank you for putting up with all our emails and calls, and Craig McBeath with all the logo stuff he had to do. Thank you all. Take it.
I'm so